Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another F1 Worldwide, and this time we are actually going worldwide again, and we are heading over to our kind of, close friends from over the pond, and we are in America, and we are with Ric and Mandy from RaceFanHeaven, and very excited to have these guys on this show. So they run a podcast very much containing F1 and IndyCar, but I'll let you guys give a quick little intro to yourselves, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Mike. I am Ric, the founder of RaceFanHeaven, and we do a lot of racing, but we focus on IndyCar and F1. And I ran into the crazy Mandy a while back, and she is our F1 expert and maybe a Ferrari fan. I'm thinking by what she's wearing with her Ferrari shirt right now, she might be a Ferrari fan.
Maybe.
But go ahead and introduce yourself, Mandy.
I'm Mandy. Hey guys. All right. So F1 and IndyCar are my two passions. So I love, talking about it. I love sharing. I grew up watching F1 with my dad and going to IndyCar races with my dad. And he passed away 2 years ago. And before he passed away, he told me to always remember him. So I am doing a podcast, a racing podcast, so I can share my passion with all of you and honor him. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And I'm a Ferrari fan.
I'm not sure if we quite got that, Mandy. I think just one more time. Who are you a fan of?
Sebastian Vettel.
Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari.
Ask her about her Seb story at Coda. That's a very good story. That's a good way to start.
Oh, I think the better way to do that is to kind of I'll find the link to that podcast in the description below, because that was a very good kind of story from there. But guys, thank you very much for coming on. And interesting enough, in that intro and what Mandy gave, it actually leads into quite nicely our topic for today. And so our topic for today, as usual on the F1 Worldwide, I find a topic that's usually close to our kind of guests' hearts on there. So we are going to be talking about Ferrari, and we are going to be talking about Ferrari and their potential in 2020. So obviously we'll be taking a look at, the previous seasons and what we can kind of look to expect from 2020. And I suppose we will throw in a question at the end there of, will Sebastian Vettel still be at Ferrari after the 2020 season? I know it may be a little painful one to answer for Mandy. So first up, guys, I throw it over to you. What do you think you can expect from Ferrari in 2020?
Well, obviously, it's kind of hard without the testing. We don't know, right? But I think that we can. It's the Tifosi Mandy talking, right? Because I'm going to set the bar really low. I'm going to set the bar really low so that my hopes are big. Okay. I think that if Ferrari doesn't get it together, I think we're going to see some more pain. We're in for another heartbreaking season if they can't get the two cars right. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like a lot through the season, they've had one car that was good, one car that wasn't good, and they weren't able to successfully get both of them right. And I think that caused a lot of inner drama. I think that caused a lot of drama in between Sebastian Vettel and Leclerc, and not to mention when you call out those team orders right at the beginning, and you say, "Oh, Seb, you're going to be the best driver," before Charles has even had a chance to prove himself, I think you kind of set yourself up for failures. But I think that Ferrari, I think Binotto has realized, hopefully, that making bold decisions like that early on probably wasn't the way to go. I think that he probably he'll have more trust in the drivers, and I think if he's smart, he will go for whoever's the fastest to always kind of be. That's my rules. Like if whoever the fastest driver is, let them ahead, right? Let them ahead, let them be, or at least that's what we do in IndyCar.
Well, Ferrari's a little different animal.
It is.
Ferrari forever, and I say this on our show all the time. I'm the old man of the group. I'm the old guy. So I've been watching Ferrari and drama at Ferrari for decades. And Ferrari tends to, it's almost like Ferrari has to have drama. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's an Italian thing. I don't know if it's a Ferrari thing. But it's like they have to have drama. I can't imagine a bland season at Ferrari ever. It doesn't seem to happen. Mm-hmm. So they almost thrive on that dramatic, things going on, and especially last year with the whole who's the lead driver, the team order situation, and we did a show a while back where we talked about in IndyCar, not to bring it back to IndyCar right now, but Roger Penske Motorsports for years has had very, very good drivers head to head, and hasn't really had those issues. And it's because the drivers I can remember years ago sitting in a transporter with Gilles de Ferran and Elio Castroneves and talking to them about Indy and what's your team orders, who's the lead driver. And it's just, their team orders were race each other, but don't wreck each other. That's the golden rule. And they knew that if they wrecked each other while racing each other, whoever's fault it was they're going to pay. They were going to pay either by losing their ride or something was going to happen that wasn't good for them. Ferrari, on the other hand, tends to be, they almost generate their own drama. The team order situation and, all those things. And I know for F1 and IndyCar are quite different in a lot of ways. But hopefully in 2020, they will be able to have two drivers who together bring the team up, make the team faster, race each other, and hopefully make the cars and the team better.
Right.
Without all that drama, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
And I think the only way that could happen, is if they get two cars, like I said, that have a chance, because I feel like Seb and Charles, they're both, they're fighting. They're fighting. Charles is coming in. He has to prove himself. And Seb is holding on for dear life because he is at the end of his career. And he's trying to prove himself, too, that he's still worth, being there at Ferrari. And I think that when one of them has a better car and the other one doesn't, it just causes friction, and it just causes all this unnecessary drama because you have someone always overcompensating, right? Because you have to when your car's not well, you have to overcompensate, and it on both parts, right? Like, we've seen Charles do it, we've seen Seb do it, and this is throughout the season, and I think that's what it is. And did you notice you didn't see so much of that with Kimi and Seb? You didn't see when Kimi was there, their cars were pretty much on par, and you don't see that. And granted, I know Kimi was, kind of on his way out into, but he hadn't been on a podium since like Coda, which by the way I saw, which was amazing. Sorry, I had to throw that in. But I mean, and Seb was the younger dog, so you get that. But I think that if you look back at those seasons, the cars you weren't having the issues that you were having now. I mean, right off the bat, Charles had, he couldn't even win the race, and he couldn't because his car and everyone's crying, you're at the end, and it's like, and then on top of that, you have stuff that's happened in Canada with Seb, and that affects his ego. And then it's like, but then to have cars when he had a good car, and it's like you get knocked down and you can't deliver two cars to these two good drivers, they're gonna fight and they're gonna have this drama. And as long as you have this issue, there's going to be that, there just is. And I think that until they can find these two cars, like Mercedes is able to deliver two cars to their drivers, I think we're always going to have this problem with and I think it'll happen too, even if Seb leaves, like with another driver. I think it will, for sure, because you're going to always have these, my car's better, why is his car better, why is your car better this weekend, why is your car, it's kind of like that kind of deal. And I think that's the key. I think that's the key to Ferrari is, and obviously to win a championship, you have to have two cars that are on point, right?
Sure.
You can't have one car one weekend be on pole and then the other one be fifth or sixth. It's been so inconsistent when you look at the results, right? We're not talking about second and third, like 1 and 2 qualifying. We're talking about like Charles getting pole a lot and Seb being like, where are you, Seb? Fifth, sixth, fourth, I mean, that's so inconsistent.
Yeah, they've got to pull together. That's really, I think, the thing for Ferrari is they've got to find a way. At the beginning of the season, it was all Seb and Charles was the new guy. And it wasn't very long before all of a sudden the attitude was, well, maybe Seb isn't our lead driver. Maybe Charles is now our lead driver. And I think anytime you have that in any team where it's not, it doesn't have to be dictated, but it has to be understood that what's going on within the team. There's a lot of things that we don't see. And there's a lot of things that we'll never know. But the speculation is that Ferrari internally made a decision that, hey, Charles is our guy now, and Seb not so much. And, of course, then Seb starts to feel that, and that leads to all this drama. You don't, and I'm not really advocating this, but you don't see that, say, with, let's say, Hamilton and Bottas. It's very clearly understood who the lead driver is, period. And Bottas knows it, and Hamilton knows it, and they act accordingly. Whereas Ferrari has worked themselves into this situation now where they're not quite sure. Is Seb still good? Is Charles the guy for the future? We know that now with his contract extension, of course. But as far as right now, who's number one? And they are race car drivers, and they're always going to be competitive, even on the same team. But they've got to find a way to make that competitiveness, let that competitiveness make the team and the car better.
Yeah, I think absolutely. In terms of, I had some very good points. I'll try and decipher in terms of where we kind of went in from there. We let Mandy go on Ferrari and the passion.
I'm going to be hopeful because they have made so many mistakes this year. So Tifosi, I don't think we can go any lower. Than Brazil.
No.
The funny point is,
Brazil, Mike.
the funny point is when when this comes out, me and Ash would have already had 10 Reasons Why, one of our kind of mini series that we kind of do of things, and one of them is 10 Reasons Why Ferrari Can Win, and one of Ash's points was literally that it can't get any worse. But I think that finding a way to manage Sebastian and Charles is, they got caught in two minds. If they'd gone with Kimi another season, I actually think Ferrari probably would have had a lot better season than what they ended up with in the 2020 season. But they were bringing in Charles because they wanted to cover off the Red Bull threat that is Max Verstappen. And they expected Charles to do well, but I don't think even the most optimistic Charles fans could have expected how quickly he hit the ground running. I mean, Bahrain, the second race of the season, he literally blitzed that weekend, bar winning it, which was completely out of his control. But, it was the team orders came in and was like, you got to stay behind Seb. And he was like, no, I'm quicker. And I think this is the problem for Ferrari, because history doesn't favour their idea well. Two strong drivers within the same team never has historically ended well in F1, in terms of, obviously you go back to look at, Rosberg and Hamilton were the most recent one, Webber and Vettel. The biggest one of all time is obviously Prost and Senna. And you kind of look at these guys and you go, well, they're fighting for something that most people can only ever dream of, which is to be the best of something in the world. Seb knows that feeling, but he wants to emulate Michael. Charles never had that feeling, so they're not going to slip up because both want it desperately. So when push comes to shove, even with the best of team orders, it's always going to be difficult to manage on that front, because at the end of the day, they have to be selfish on that front.
Yeah, they have to.
They're race car drivers. That's what they're paid to do. I think where Ferrari really loses it is they try to control them in such a way that makes them both mad. Neither one is happy about the way things go when they try to give these team orders that are so. That's why I used the Penske example. It was one simple order: race, but don't wreck.
Exactly.
But then with Ferrari, it's all this. Well, you're gonna probably be in this corner first, so draft then. But then let the other guy go by. Let your teammate in and no and yes, and that's where it gets. That's where you go into Ferrari drama, and it bites them hard.
Right.
Especially when you wreck two cars, the two same cars. Both your team cars are out. I think that's where they get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, Sochi was the most bizarre. I'll jump in and then I'll let you go on it with Mandy. In terms of, Sochi was the most bizarre team order that obviously Rick, I know you've been watching for there, but it was the most bizarre team order I've ever witnessed in F1. I mean, I know when people when a lot were with the kind of Massa team order back when they were kind of illegal, and the Rubens Barrichello one with Michael Schumacher on the straights, those were like they kind of shook fans and they didn't feel it was right. This Ferrari one was bizarre. I mean, to have such a gamble that Seb wouldn't get a good start, and then Seb was quite clearly quicker and Charles couldn't catch him, but then they wanted to sacrifice, and they kind of sacrificed him. I know his MG UK kind of gave up on him in the end, but they kind of forced him out when he needed a pit far later, and you were just like, it was the weirdest thing ever. But yes, Mandy, I'll let you jump in on that point, and I'll let you go.
No, I was just going to say, and obviously I'm a diehard Seb fan, but to be honest, whoever the fastest car is, that's my rule, is like, whoever is faster should just go ahead and go. Like, they should be whatever, if it comes down to that. But the problem is why are you trying, like with Ferrari, the problem with them is they try to predict these races before they even happen, right? Which is what we were talking about right there in Sochi. And it's like, there's no need, like, when you just kind of set yourself up for failure for that, right? Like, if you just let the drivers race, and you let them do their thing, then they're cool, and they can do what they need to do. And whoever's faster, if Charles, you're faster, then Seb, let him by or whatever, if that's what it has to take to win the championship. Now if we're like in a case where it's like, okay, it's a little different because this person's going to win the driver's championship. It's a little bit. I can understand that's different, but for the most part, just let them race. That's all they need to do is just race. And the thing is that it's just so weird. It's so bizarre that of everything that is with Ferrari, but it's like I just keep going back to the cars. Why can't both cars work? Why can't both cars? I mean, why? I remember being at COTA, and it was bumpy, but remember Seb at the very beginning was complaining about his car before he even went there at turn 19, and then Charles doesn't have that problem, and I'm just like, why is it always, and the same thing with Charles, and Bayron and stuff, like, why, and then it's just like, I don't understand, why can't you just get it together and get these two cars, like, do you know what I mean? And I would feel more hopeful if we ended the season, like, let's say, like, on Brazil, and well, we don't know what happened in Brazil because we don't know what could have happened, right? In Brazil, we don't know because they crashed each other out.
Sure.
But let's say if Brazil and in Dubai, like Seb and Charles were like 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, I would feel like, okay, maybe they're onto something with their car wise, right? But then the recent news comes out, the Ferrari, and it's like, oh, but and everybody's like, oh, we it's not where we need to be, and it's just like, oh, like I can't even I just want to get my head and just run it against the wall and just go, can it get any worse than this? Is this really how it's going to be before the season even started?
The world's number one frustrated Ferrari fan right here. And that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot. Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, I felt like I think we all know. I think we all know what happened in 2018. Seb could have had he had the fight. He actually had the fight there with Lewis. He took it a little bit further, but he made some driver errors, but the cars were there. And then we know that. We all know that. I can admit that as a Seb fan. He did make the mistakes, the driver mistakes. That's why he didn't win. But he had the car. And Kimi had the car too. Why can't we get back to that? Why is it now that the cars just aren't that way? I just can't figure that out. I can't figure out where the down slope is going.
Maybe it's a driver style thing. Maybe it has to do with the two driver styles, what they like in the car, and trying to get them
right there. That could be it. And the thing is there's no doubt Charles is a more adaptable driver than Seb is. I think that's fair enough to say. He is. I mean, he's able to come into that Ferrari and he's able to make more points. Obviously. But don't get me wrong. He's had some things too. He's, people, they both have something about spinning. They both like to spin. Everyone likes to spin in the Ferraris. Like Charles has done it too. Because he has. Charles has crashed and spun out too a couple times. Something about those Ferraris he just like. But Seb likes to do it more. But I just think that if they could get their cars in a good spot. And I would have felt better if we ended on a high note, Does that make sense? If we ended Dubai and Brazil, on a high note. And by the way, Charles wasn't, when I was at COTA, Charles wasn't, he couldn't catch up either. To get a podium. So, and I remember there being like, oh, we're going to be fast. We're not fast, but we're not. They just didn't have that power, and obviously they, Red Bull was better than Ferrari, and I think their chances, if they can get, like I said, if they can give both of them good cars, I think that might ease the tension between Seb and Charles to where they don't have to overcompensate as much and make these driver errors, both of them, and everything else. And you won't. And if they could just let them race and not go in there like they did this with Seb, you're number one, and then like they did this season. I think that if they can get those things together, and then
it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting this year because, last year was such turmoil. Mm-hmm. And like you said, Mike, at the beginning of the year, Seb was, the number one driver. Nobody expected Charles to come in and be that quick, that fast. And it changed very rapidly. It wasn't even halfway into the season before there was it was palpable, even in the media, it was palpable that behind the scenes there was things going on and there were conversations being had within the Ferrari management about, whoa, maybe Seb isn't our number one guy this year. You could almost tell that was what was going through their mind, and I think that's what led to a lot of the orders and turmoil and chaos. But now, going into this year, it's almost 180 degrees. You've got to think that Ferrari team management is going, well, Charles is our guy for the future. We just signed a long-term contract. We're going to do whatever we can for him. Seb has one more year, so you start to you can see them, you can anticipate them doing everything for Charles and not so much for Seb because of the future. But again, it's Ferrari, so that's going to blow up into even more drama, and who knows what's going to happen. It's funny because Seb and Charles are not. It's not like Pro Senna where they really didn't like each other.
No, they do like each other.
They do like each other.
Mike, okay, so I just have to say this, because this is something that when I did meet Seb, when I chased down the Ferrari, I didn't know Charles was in there. I didn't know he was in the passenger seat because I was so focused on Seb. But I saw them, and they were laughing together. First of all, they were driving the same car together,
right?
Okay, and second of all, they were laughing and joking, and this was before, this was on quali day. So they get along. Those guys get along.
Yeah.
Those guys get along. They really do.
Except on the racetrack, apparently.
Yeah, and I guess all things, that's how it is. You're teammates, right? So you're going to fight. You're going to fight. You're going to take it there.
Sure.
I think...
What's going to happen in 2020 with them?
With 2020, I think that...
Will they still be good friends? That's a great question. Will they still be good friends at the end of 2020?
Yeah, I think they will be. I think they're always going to be that way because they have respect for each other. What I saw in that Ferrari was real. I tell you, that was real. Those were genuine moments between both of them.
They were laughing at you.
They were. Charles was
That's what they were laughing at.
He was laughing. Charles was laughing at Mike because I straight up, I ignored him. I didn't see it because I didn't realize it was him.
She didn't even see him.
I didn't even see him. And then at the end, Charles, oh hey! And he looks at me and goes, ha! Like he just noticed me. Ha!
She dissed him.
I didn't mean to diss him. Okay.
Anyway, we digress.
I digress. Okay.
Right. So, well, I think what we'll do is, I think for Ferrari, I think we've covered it here. The 2020 season is going to be absolutely massive for them, driver-wise. It's so important how Charles and Vettel's way that they're going to perform on track, and is going to affect how they can get the performances, for the team. Will they be friends, like you said? I think I agree with you, Mandy. I think they genuinely do get on. I don't think there is the animosity towards each other. But again, like we said before, they do have that selfish goal that if either of them have a chance of being world champion, that friendship will go by the wayside. To probably round off on the driver front before we probably talk about the car a little bit more, in terms of my theory, I think I've shared it a couple of times, is I very much feel if I was Bonotto and I was sitting in at Ferrari, I've just signed Charles Leclerc to a long-term contract. I've got Sebastian Vettel's contract running out at the end of the year. What I would turn to Charles, I would go, you're our guy for the future. We're going to back you. We're going to give everything. We're going to get, after this season, we're going to get you a number 2 driver in, maybe someone like Giovinazzi, who if he improves like he was towards the end of the season, could be a solid number 2 in a Ferrari car. He wouldn't kind of be vying for number 1 spot, because having that Italian link, being an Italian in Ferrari, that might just be good enough for him. So what we're going to do this season is 2020, everything's behind Seb. So we're going to build a car with a lot more downforce, that has a lot more kind of secure in the front end. A car much like 2017 for Seb, much more like his Red Bull days that he was successful in. We're going to give him one last chance, win the title, and we're saying we're not renewing your contract. So you either win the title and you go out in Ferrari on high, or thank you, Seb, for your service over the next few years. We'll go our separate ways. We're now going to invest in the Charles Leclerc one. And I think that would be the most logical way, because I think Charles would be able to stomach 1 year, as he knows that he's got the contract and he's got several years to kind of embed himself. I think Sebastian, it would be harder to tell him, Charles our guy. In his last year on the contract, he'd be like, that's my dream over, and it would be one way of kind of deflating your driver. But I think for the car, what I'll kind of get your thoughts on, obviously in 2019, I would say is probably one of the worst designed Ferraris that they can have, in terms of, it was very good at straight line speed, and they're like, what we're going to do is, it's difficult to overtake outside DRS zones, so we're going to have a really quick straight car. But unfortunately, their car was so slow in corners that, you know, they weren't getting the pole positions on the Saturdays, so therefore it didn't matter that they could overtake people in the straights. They could never catch them because they were so far behind on the straights, until, you know, later on when the downforce came on Singapore.
Exactly.
Prime example for that, when Vettel, you know, it was no coincidence to me. Downforce setup came on the Ferrari. Sebastian put in a good performance and won in Singapore. But yes, it would be interesting. We did say earlier, it can't get any worse. Surely in 2020 they have to have a more balanced car that they build.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And, you know, did you notice, I feel like they're always a step below Mercedes. Like last year Mercedes, they had this straight speed. Like, remember, they were like really
early in the year.
Yeah, early and it was like, sorry, we're talking about 2019. I'm sorry, I meant 2018. In 2018, sorry, 2018. Sorry, we're in 2020. And yes, thank you. And then now I felt like Ferrari's like, okay, now we're going to get that straight speed this past year, 2019, right? But by the time they do that, Mercedes is already like, bye, we got both down. We've got the corners and the straights. And I feel like that's what I mean by Ferrari. Just they're always just a step below in terms of the car with Mercedes, and Mercedes just always has it figured out. And I really hope that they can get it together, because you have these, like I said, those two drivers. And I agree with you. I always tell people, yes, Charles is the future of Ferrari, and he is the future of Ferrari. And Seb is built, a lot there and has done so much. And yes, he's out, but Lewis is going to be out too. They're all going to be out, right? They're all going to be out eventually. But yes, Charles is the future of it. And I would hope that, yes, after this season, I would hope that he goes to a lesser team like Kimi. Do you know what I mean? I do. I really hope he does, because I feel like Seb is one of those drivers that really loves racing. I feel like that's in him. I don't feel like all the drivers are like that on the grid, but I do feel like he genuinely loves racing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I do too.
And I feel like...
So, do you agree with Mike? Do you think
I do.
You think they'll build the car more for Seb this year?
I think so too.
Or they should? I don't know if Mike might want to clarify that. Do you think they will do that, or are you hoping they will do that?
It's what I would do.
Yeah.
I think anyone's guess is as good as mine as what Ferrari will actually do, because
that's my point. Exactly.
I have a popular theory with Ferrari in terms of, you spoke about, Mercedes build a car around Lewis Hamilton. Obviously Red Bull do that with Max Verstappen, and obviously did it around Seb back in the day. Ferrari, I'm pretty sure, since the days of Michael Schumacher, once they got back on top, the kind of arrogance is probably the wrong way. The kind of pride in Ferrari name is them going, we'll just build a fast car, you drive it. We'll build what we think's fast, you drive it, rather than, I'm pretty sure, Mercedes...
All the way back to Enzo Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Enzo Ferrari?
Oh, the Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh, the Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah, don't get me started on that. That's a whole other show. We don't need to do that today.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing.
No, but I totally, I agree with Mike. I think that's the smart thing to do too, because yes, Charles, they signed him on for 5 years, and like if you go in with a plan like that, and you set the expectations for the drivers that way, then people can cool off a little bit, and it put people.
That would be great, but will they? It is Ferrari.
No, of course not.
There you go. And there you go.
Bingo.
There is one other option. Yeah. The other option is they write Seb off. they go, well, we got one more year with Seb, whatever, we don't care. We're going to build a car for Charles, and he's our future, and Seb will just have to deal with it until it's
No, I'll come over to Maranello. No.
Don't get Mandy mad.
I will personally come over.
The problem is with that. The problem is with that, obviously, is what they've seen in Mercedes. Although Bottas, and obviously, well, in the time of when Rosberg was there, their car was just so dominant, like McLaren in the late 80s, that they could do whatever they want against each other because no one was anywhere near. But Mercedes have actually had a car that's been catchable in the past few years. If Red Bull reliability issues, if Ferrari a number of issues had got right, you know, but they've had in Valtteri Bottas someone that they can use as a weapon almost in terms of in tactics. So if they just completely write Seb off, Seb would compete in terms of that, but he certainly wouldn't be compliant in orders, and so you then risk losing the championship with Charles because that second driver is so important, and that's the reason why Red Bull got rid of Gasly midway through the season, because he wasn't doing the second driver job that they needed him to do.
That's why I always go back to you have to have two good cars so that they could both be in there together, helping each other out. You know, you need that. You definitely need that. I mean, definitely. So, I know deep down Ferrari loves Seb. I mean, he's been such a good. I don't think they would do him wrong like that. I don't think they would personally.
Yeah.
I don't think they would. No, and Binotto just really, you can tell that he just really likes Seb a lot. And you can tell he likes both of them. Like, you know, you can tell. He's like he's like the father that's like, my children are fighting, you know? That's like how he is. He always looks like that.
He looks like a harried father of two teenagers.
Sometimes he looks like Harry Potter or the Ghostbusters guy. You know, but no, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway.
We'll see what happens. Very soon. We'll see what happens.
So yeah, I think basically in a roundabout way that 2020 conclusion is Ferrari have it all there. They can get it right. They can build a car that is going to be fantastic. Obviously, the return of Simon Resta to the aero department, I think, is quite a big one for them over. Matteo Binotto's second season as team principal would have, you know, it is probably the most difficult job other than driving within a team to kind of get all those moving parts going right. So, you know, there's a lot there. But what we're saying is we have not a clue because it's Ferrari. Is probably
precisely
is probably the fair assessment of that.
Well, and then the other thing is it can't get worse, right?
Watch what you hope for.
I know. I'm going to bite my words.
Well,
don't worry, you'll come at me. We'll come at me.
No,
I don't know, Mandy.
Don't ever say that.
I've cried a lot this season. What?
I was going to say, I don't know. Do you remember Ferrari kind of at the start of last decade? That wasn't a desirable kind of Ferrari situation.
No.
They were lucky that they had a driver who could drive the pants off the car. But yeah, I think we now go to that second part of the question that maybe Mandy might be dreading at this part in the podcast. Rick, I'm going to have to, need you to console. But I did kind of obviously hint at it a little bit there in terms of what I think. Do we think Ferrari at the end of the 2020 season will say, goodbye, Seb, thank you very much? And if they do, who do you see coming in to partner Charles?
So the thing is that I hope he has. I mean, I hope something's. If that's true, I hope he ends on a good note. I don't see the harmony. I don't think Charles is going to back off. And to be fair, he shouldn't have to back off. Like, why should you? We're talking about race car drivers here. We're not talking about people at a tea party making friends, so Charles has every right to fight like that. But I think that they're going to probably have to cater to Charles because they signed him on for 5 years, like you said. And I think that I hope that this year is a good year for Seb, and it might be his last year. But the problem is I don't know who they could put in there right now. I've been kind of going through that, like, through my head, and I can see Giovinazzi, obviously, as one, but and he would be ideal for Charles because they would. I think one thing that Ferrari's learning is you do have to have a dominant driver and someone that's going to be the same. You can't have the two strong drivers.
It's got to be a clear choice.
It's got to be a clear choice, and I think that, like, Giovinazzi would be okay with that. I totally think that he would. Charles, but he would. He would be okay with that, and obviously that would be good for Charles. So, but I think it's probably going to happen, like, mid-season, we're going to hear, because I think that if it continues like this, I think they might get rid of Seb. If it continues like this, like it was last season.
I was just going to say that. I think the first quarter to half of the season is going to determine the answer to that question.
Yes.
Do they continue to have issues? Mm-hmm. Driver issues, I'm talking about.
Right.
Or will they live in harmony and peace and rainbows and unicorns and finish 1-2 in a couple of races, and everything was beautiful, and then maybe they look at Seb for another year or two. But let's face it, Seb is toward the end of his career. He
is, but people also forget, like, Lewis is older than him. Lewis is older than Seb.
But they're still getting there.
No, they are.
Yeah, they're at the point where they're looking toward the end, not toward the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I know this much, Mike. Whatever happens at Ferrari this year, whatever decisions are made, whatever occurs, whatever drivers do, whatever the team does, it'll probably be dramatic. Because it always is at Ferrari.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes, but I can guarantee that.
I will say one thing. I think that, here's my thing. I think, like, we'll know, like I said, halfway season, and I'll say if this stuff continues, this drama and the Brazil, if that happens, I think Seb will be out. If that continues to happen, I think Seb will be out. But I think that if they could find the harmony within the team, I think that Seb could stay on, because like you said too, you need a second driver that's on par to help each other out. And I don't think Giovinazzi's there yet. I can't think of anyone else. I have to be honest. I've been racking my head about that. You know what I would have wanted? I know, and I'm crazy because I'm so crazy. I want Max and Charles to be teammates. I do, because
that would be wild.
I love Max, so I like Max a lot too. I like them both, and I want them to be like, I just want to burn it down. Burn it down!
Oh no!
Burn it down! What would happen?
That would be wild.
Would that be insane?
I mean, that would be living to Ferrari's ethos of dramatic, Mandy.
Yes.
I think Charles and Max would be a partnership that fans would want. Any team boss would be tearing their hair out and handing their resignation probably the next day, because they would go, that's undealable. What have you done? You are mental. We're not going to be able to deal with that. But
exactly.
I think, look, this is me saying Ferrari think logically, which, sometimes you can see in their decisions that logic doesn't necessarily come into them. I think for me, they desperately hope that Giovinazzi continues to improve, and I've said this multiple times. He's got one of the best places to improve. He's under Kimi Räikkönen, who I think as a mentor would be amazing, because even if Giovinazzi beat him, I don't think Kimi would be too fussed. I think he'd be like, fair play. He's now got Robert Kubica there as a reserve driver, so he's now got two drivers with an extortionate amount of experience and brilliant racing minds to tap into. He was getting better. He has the natural pace qualifying. He just was struggling with finding it and putting it in the race. But obviously the P5 in Brazil, with Kimi taking advantage of the Seb and Leclerc incident, it showed really good positive improvement, and he was definitely going in the right direction towards the end of the season. I think he is the absolutely ideal candidate for Charles Leclerc as a number 2. I think he would be the dream one, because I think he does have the ability to be a solid number 2, but I think he also would be quite happy to, if Ferrari went, Charles our guy, you've got the Ferrari seat, you're going to help out the team. I think if winning the constructors with Ferrari would be enough for Giovinazzi. It may be a little bit harsh playing down his priorities, but I think he'd have some kind of concept of where he is as a driver. The other one that gets muted, and I think would be interesting due to the relationship with the Tifosi with him, and that is Daniel Ricciardo. If he does not believe in the Renault project, obviously his contract is up at the end of the year. The question would be, if they don't think Charles and Seb's going to work, are they willing to risk Ricciardo and Leclerc working in that situation? But he would obviously be a naturally good driver.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting pair. Ricciardo?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
then, you know what? Then Seb can go back with Kimi to Alfa Romeo.
Look at that, and they can go on racing forever, because Kimi's not going to retire.
Simi! Bring Simi back!
They race off into the sunset together.
Oh, it's perfect.
I think they would love that. They would love that. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Seb retired before Kimi Räikkönen. He's probably got another 20 years in the sport, the way that he looks like he's going.
No, it's true. Sure.
Kimi racing when he's 60 is something that would be hilarious to watch. But yes, that is a.
And he would be the one to do it.
That is another kind of dream partnership. I think both of them, in fairness to Seb and Kimi, would definitely be intrigued by the 2021 rules. I think, as a racing driver, yes, there's a lot of hope and optimism, but there's also that of, what if it does actually make things closer? And every racing driver backs themselves, so it's there. But going back to kind of a Charles partner, I think Giovinazzi is the most realistic one that they will hope for. Ricciardo is an interesting concept one, but if it really isn't, if Giovinazzi doesn't look like he's capable enough, do they just kind of stick with Seb? That would be the question. Even kind of take it on the chin and just say, Seb, to give you a new contract, you are a number 2. You're going to carry on racing for Ferrari. You can do a job here. You can still be successful with Ferrari in a Constructors' Championship. It's a difficult one, but yeah, like you said, when you actually come down to think about it, who might actually be able to drive for them, there aren't very many options that could be viable.
No. And the other thing is, would Seb even care to do that at this point in his career?
Yeah, because he would have to not sign the contract. He could not sign the contract. That's a very good point.
That's what I'm saying. He could just decide, that I'm good. So it's good. I go back to that. The first half of the season, I think, is going to dictate a lot of that, how it goes, for sure.
Definitely.
I think that's going to have a lot to do with what Ferrari thinks and what they want to do for 2021 and beyond. Mm-hmm. Back anyway, 2021. We all know that. So. Exactly.
So Alonso's, returned, and Charles Leclerc's going to have to accept being number 2, because Nando is number 2 to no man.
Yeah.
No.
Start all the rumors now.
There you go.
No, I'll be told off. I've already spoken about Fernando Alonso far too much in the most recent week, so...
You're already in trouble. Yep.
That's funny.
I'll be told off by people for bringing up Fernando again. But yes, I think...
that's correct.
But I think the kind of driver market... I actually think Sebastian holds the keys to how exciting or non-exciting it may be. I think if Seb leaves Ferrari, then that looks like the probably only major seat that will be available, because if Mercedes switch Bottas, it will probably just be for Russell or Ocon, so that there isn't really much. Ferrari's kind of the real big major seat that's kind of would be up for grabs if Vettel is vacated or vacates the seat. So yeah, that'll be very interesting, I think, on that front.
So you're saying Hamilton's not going anywhere?
Nope, absolutely not.
Nope.
Nope.
It's a lot.
I
Okay.
mean, obviously, a lot depends on Mercedes. I think if Lewis Hamilton wins this year, which a betting man would probably put their money behind,
Sure.
Mercedes and Lewis, it wouldn't make sense to be one away from history. I know Mercedes would make history themselves as a team, but to have a driver and provide the driver the chance to become the outright, most winner of World Drivers' Championships, it seems Lewis Hamilton seems like he's switched on. For me, Ferrari would be too much of a risk. He's seen drivers of his generation, like Alonso, like Raikkonen, like Seb, who've gone there, and it hasn't quite worked out how they would have hoped and dreamed for. So I think if he was hoping for that one last title, I think he would go with his head rather than his heart. So Mercedes would be the one.
It'll be an interesting second half of the year. Whatever Wolf does, whatever Mercedes does, it's going to have a lot to do with everything, for sure.
It will be.
Yep.
It will indeed. And obviously, as of recording, today was the breaking news that Aston Martin make their return into F1. So that is another very exciting team, I think, for F1's future as well. But I think that probably rounds up our Ferrari. Our concluding thoughts would probably be Ferrari 2020, flip of a coin, have all the potential in the world, huge budget, as always. They have the drivers capable of winning a world championship. They have the team, they have the infrastructure there to win a world championship. Whether they actually get all those bits moving in the right direction like Mercedes do so masterfully every year is another question. And Seb, again, unsure whether he'll stay, but I imagine it is probably veering more towards the end of this may be his time and opening the chapter of Charles Leclerc's story at Ferrari.
Agreed, totally.
Yep.
So, I think how we will round off this podcast, because obviously bringing you guys on and listening, mentioned it at the start of the podcast, is obviously you guys try to share your love of both IndyCar and Formula One, and obviously you share news of it in the podcast. And I think it would be a real shame if we didn't kind of tap into some of that knowledge. So I'll by controlling it, but not obviously, because it could end up into a whole other podcast in terms of that.
A whole other show.
Maybe a chance on that. So what I will say is, because there may be people listening to this who don't really follow IndyCar and don't really know much about it, know that it's what you kind of crazy Yanks do over there. It's your version of Formula One, and it'd be interesting if you guys. I'll give you both the opportunity. If you could you're now kind of a salesman. You're pitching IndyCar. Why should people watch IndyCar, and what's the appeal of IndyCar?
Wait, I have the best one. Hold on. I've been thinking about this actually. Okay, coming from me, because I got into Formula One first and then IndyCar second, so I feel like I have a good way. Okay, Formula One fans, let me break it down to you. You have a chance to watch. If you do, because I know IndyCar might not be accessible to everyone, but if you have a chance, check IndyCar out. Why? Because it's pure racing, and you can enjoy it from pure racing standpoint. And what I mean by that is, when you're a Formula One fan, like me, you have your driver, Sebastian Vettel, me, or your driver, Lewis Hamilton, your driver, Max, when you're watching Formula One, you're so emotionally connected, right? Because you're backing your driver up, right? You're into it because you're so into the team. But when you watch a series like IndyCar, it's way more chill because you're like, I'm not really because it's a new series. You're not as connected to a driver. So all of them are exciting. And it's like you can actually watch a race and actually appreciate the pure racing, right? As opposed to the politics, as opposed to, like I said, your driver, like, oh, this drama with Leclerc and Seb. It's like you get to take a break and it's less stressful. And it's just, like I said, it's just pure racing. It's amazing. It's extremely accessible. I have one of my really good friends, Karen. She lives in the UK, and she's obsessed with IndyCar. She comes every year now to COTA. COTA's her favorite track. She's a huge Rossi fan, and that's how we met because I'm a Rossi fan too. But these drivers in IndyCar are awesome, and they're so accessible. You can go to an IndyCar race and you can be VIP for like even way half. Like what VIP for Formula One for one day is like what, or for a weekend is like $6,000 or something. You can be VIP for like $1,000 at an IndyCar race, and you can actually have access, or you can even have access to like a paddock pass that's like less than $100 US dollars, and you can go into the paddock and you can meet the drivers. The drivers are they're so accessible. You walk around and they're happy to see you. They're happy to take a moment. It's not like in Formula One where, everyone crowds them and they have their PR, their PR people. No, they're just walking around and they're just like, hey, what's up? Like, and you can like literally just walk up to them and talk to them, and it's amazing. And it's not, you're not going to see the technology that's in Formula One, because that's what Formula One is. Formula One will always be that pinnacle. But IndyCar, you're just going to get that raw excitement, pure racing, and it just warms your heart. It's just so cool.
It is. And I'll tack on some technical stuff to that. So the thing about IndyCar is that it's essentially a spec series. There's one car. Every team buys the same car, and then we have two engines. We have Chevy and we have Honda, and they're very, very equal. And they, it's an engine lease. Each team leases that engine, and even within the Honda teams, they basically make a bunch of identical engines, and they give them to each team by lottery each race. So there's no favoritism. Not one engine with a tiny bit more horsepower. Of course, technically these days, it's not like it was even 20 or 30 or way back. But even 10 years ago, they can make them so equal. So it makes the cars very, very equal. The thing about IndyCar, the one area that's not really governed is the suspension, the dampers, the shock absorbers. They make as we all know in racing, or most people know, they make a huge difference in the handling of the car. The dampers and how they react to the track is everything in IndyCar. It really is. So there is still a little bit of a hierarchy in the sense that the better teams, even though they have the same car as a lesser team, they have more money to spend on that one thing, on the suspension and getting that extra tenth or two. But like Mandy said, it is more pure racing because the cars are so equal. In F1, and this is not to disparage F1, but the latest, greatest, a driver that comes in and is an unknown and has more talent than Senna had, if he's not in the top two or three teams, it's not going to happen. You can't make that car go faster no matter how good you are. So, like Mandy said, it's different. It's the same, but it's different. F1 is more car driven, more technologically driven, more more driver driven as far as you have your favorite driver. How did you say it?
Yeah, you get emotionally
attached to that
to your
driver.
I do.
Well, Mandy gets emotionally attached for sure. But I'll give you a great example. So we're going to go here in a couple of weeks. I'll do a little promo for us. But we're going to be, it just happened. It's just lucky for us that Circuit of the Americas here in America, that's where we live. We live in the same town. So IndyCar is they do a thing every year called spring training where everybody shows up for one big test. It's a 2-day test, and they're doing that at COTA this year. It's in 10 days. And so we're lucky enough, we live here, we're going to be able to attend. F1 fans won't even understand what I'm about to say. So on the first day of the test, the track is going to be accessible to any fan. And a fan can pay $20 and come to the test day and just walk around the track. Any season, actually, I guess it's anybody who's already bought tickets to the IndyCar race that's coming up at COTA in a couple of months, they will have free access because they've already bought a ticket. Now, that's not such a big deal, except that also that gets them into the paddock. And that also they literally can walk into the media center. There's a media center at COTA that's connected to the paddock directly. Last year, literally, there were fans and drivers and media all in the same room, just hanging out. Mm-hmm. You don't see that in F1. The drivers are so much more accessible. Now, obviously, given there's more attention to F1 and there's more fans, more people at any given race, etc. But that feeling of being that close and that accessible, literally next week when we go, there will be fans that will just be walking around the paddock and they'll see Will Power walk by and say, "Hey, Will," and he'll say, "Hey, how's it going?" And they'll have a conversation. You don't see that in F1, yeah. So that makes it really, really cool. That makes it a lot of fun, and the drivers are so open and so accessible. It makes it a lot of fun. But back to that thing about the spec series, it's really cool that on any given weekend, when you go into an F1 weekend, barring anything crazy happening, 4 to 6 drivers are going to win that race, pretty much guaranteed. At an IndyCar event, on any given weekend, 10, 15 literally have a shot to win that race. And that makes it, to me, much more fun because I'm a fan of racing. So I'm a fan of the event. I like to go in not knowing that Lewis is probably going to win because they're faster every year at this track. I like that competitiveness, and also the gap. When you look at a quality sheet from IndyCar and you see 10 cars on a road course within a tenth and a half of each other, that's amazing. So you talk about fighting for position and fighting for just that little bit is incredible. I would invite any F1 fans to watch some IndyCar races if they can. Hopefully they have it available where they are. And just forget about the drivers for a while and just watch the competitiveness. Watch how many passes for the lead, passes through the pack. There's more passes in an IndyCar race than I don't know how many F1 races. And that's not to disparage F1. I'm just saying the IndyCar race is so much more interesting from that aspect of it because so many more things happen. The other thing about IndyCar that's cool is that you have the variety of racetracks. You have ovals, you have street courses, and you have road courses. And the ovals, you have really big ovals like Indianapolis, 2.5 miles, and you have little small ovals. This year, not for the first time, but we're going back in the IndyCar series to an oval we used to race on that's 3/4 of a mile.
Tiny.
That's a tiny oval. You talk about action in a race. It's a great track to watch. If you get a chance to watch the Richmond race, I think it's in May this year. No. It's in April.
Not April.
I forget when it is. Doesn't matter. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's a round track. There's 2 or 3 different lines. You'll see cars moving to the front early and then tire degradation will come in, and you'll see other cars moving past. It's so exciting, the whole race. That's the part, and I'm an old IndyCar. I've been a race fan since I was a child, but probably IndyCar is my thing a little bit more, and that's because of that competitiveness. That's just happened in the last couple of decades. And if you get a chance to watch an IndyCar race, you will not be disappointed. I guarantee you will not be disappointed.
It's addictive.
I think that was a very good sum up of IndyCar for it. Yeah, obviously I would say I've dabbed in and out of what I can, and I'm going to try to, as I kind of, start the channel, I try to watch other series a little bit more in terms of doing it, and that is the best way to describe IndyCar and series like it. Obviously, like Formula E has risen up in terms of it is more of a spec series. A lot of the American sports, I think, out there are spec series. NASCAR is very similar, I think. On
NASCAR is very spec,
yeah, on that front. So I think, that is the best way to describe it. Formula One, I always describe, is the perfect harmony between man and machinery. It's pushing boundaries both, as far as they can go. In kind of a series like IndyCar, what it's doing is it is going guys who are absolutely fantastic race car drivers, and you're going, how do you deal with the pressure? How do you deal with the close wheel-to-wheel racing? They're probably, car combat is they might not be able to, they might not be as quick as maybe their F1 counterparts, mainly on the European circuit, but they certainly would be probably better racers within the pack, within that, because it's something that they're so used to. But it is a fantastic series from what I've seen of it, and I think, if you're a motorsport fan, if you're a race fan, it's a RaceFanHeaven. We'll put in a plug there.
Thank you. That's exactly right. That's right. We are RaceFanHeaven.
But I think there's an appeal to any sort of these series, and it certainly is exciting. And it obviously isn't identical to the ways they look and with it, but it is. It's not kind of open wheel racing. There are kind of more wheel covers on it. I am right in saying that.
Well, it's technically open wheel.
It's technically open wheel.
Yeah, now with the aero screen.
The aero screen makes it a little different. There's really no wheel covers anymore, per se.
Right.
A couple of years ago, they had some body work behind the rear wheel. They've done away with that. That was a safety thing. Mm-hmm. IndyCar with the ovals, there's a little different attitude about the safety factor because of the oval, the big ovals especially. A wreck could be much more catastrophic in certain ways. So they done some different things, and that's with the aero screen. That's why they're also doing a windshield as opposed to just a halo. Yeah. Because when on a typical oval wreck, there's a lot more pieces and parts flying around in a much smaller area. And so there's a lot of debris and different things. So that's why they went with a windshield versus just the halo.
Yeah, just like the halo.
But anyway, now we're on to a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But in general, I'll end by saying this, and this is not a dig. F1 and Indy cars are completely different to drive. Indy cars have no power steering. They're much less downforce. A little less horsepower, but much less downforce. Watch a race, an IndyCar race, and watch a lot of the in-car, especially at COTA. I keep going back to COTA because it's our home track, but it is the one track where F1 cars and Indy cars race the exact same track.
Right.
If you watch, you will have a whole new level of appreciation for IndyCar drivers if you watch the in-car. When we were there last year for the first time they were there, and it was turn 3 at COTA. When you watch an F1 car go through, after the first turn, come down the hill, it's actually turn 2, and take a hard right, the cars are smooth as silk. The driver turns in, boom, gone. I saw Alexander Rossi, Mandy's boy, in practice. I was watching him from the outside of that turn, and his hands through that turn probably corrected that car 5 times in about a second. There's so much less downforce that when there's an off-camber corner or a slightly bumpy corner, it's a constant a fight with that car to keep it on the track, whereas F1 cars are more sort of the technological part of them. The technology keeps them more glued to the racetrack. So I would invite anybody to do that. Watch some some IndyCar races on road courses, and you will be amazed at the driving that occurs from those guys.
I would say, and this is not just because Rossi's like my favorite IndyCar driver, because he is. He's my Seb. He's my Seb of IndyCar. So, but I would say if you just Google or whatever, go to YouTube and do Rossi visor. It's the visor cam.
There you go.
The visor cam. They put it right there in the visor. Watch his hands, because his hands. Even the announcers are like, it's crazy to watch him drive. It's insane.
Yeah.
I like watch him and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm stressed out. Like my. And these driving the IndyCar drivers, they always even Newgarden, what was it, last year had surgery and then he's back on track, like wrist surgery, that one driver, because the cars are so brutal on their bodies, on the IndyCar drivers, but
whole different thing,
whole different animal. But just because they're different doesn't make one better than the other.
No, not at all. It's two different things that we can appreciate equally, which is why on RaceFanHeaven, those are our two favorite series.
Exactly.
I think I would very much agree with that, guys, and I think it's something that I do more and more as I kind of broaden my horizons. Obviously a lot is like the recent argument is whether Formula E, is the new Formula One and will it overtake. I think, you just view them as separate series and you enjoy them for each their unique kind of aspect that they give, and you can just be like with anything. You don't have to. One doesn't necessarily have to be the better of the other. Whenever we describe kind of drivers who's better, at the end of the day, it's an opinion thing, and it's what you personally enjoy more. There will be personal reasons for what you enjoy, but it doesn't mean that you have less appreciation for the other. But guys, it's been an absolutely fantastic podcast. Obviously, we've been looking to get this together for I think quite some time.
Finally.
Thank you for having us. We love talking to you. We just love racing, and you're a great host, and we really appreciate the opportunity to bring our little flair up to your world.
I know. It's awesome. Thank you.
No, but thank you guys so much. It has been brilliant. And guys, if you haven't checked out the RaceFanHeaven podcast, I highly recommend you do so. I'll leave links to the podcast down below, probably in that episode where Mandy talks through the experience of when she met a certain Sebastian Vettel at COTA. And by met, I meant, charged him down in a hot pursuit that all her spin classes paid off for that very moment. But
I just talked about you on our last podcast. Well, you'll hear it. I mentioned you because you're always telling me, that's your spinning pays off.
Yep.
It does, Mike. It does.
She's in good shape.
It's the spin thing. It's the spin thing.
That's right.
It is.
Well, guys, it has been fantastic. And guys, as always, this has been an F1 Worldwide fan podcast. Yes, obviously we got the RaceFanHeaven here who have their own podcast. But as always, this podcast, what qualifies you to come on is if you are a fan of F1, or in this case, some IndyCar as well. You are more than welcome to come onto the podcast. Just drop me a message and I'm always happy to kind of do a topic and go from there. And if you've liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you're new around here or you're watching and haven't subscribed, do please subscribe to the channel. You can keep up to date with all our latest content, like the F1 Worldwide podcast, and with the season rapidly approaching, all our kind of race content we go on there. But that is a brilliant way to end it. Thank again so much, guys, and for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.